And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to look at the antenna. Now the very first time I made this using a Helix tool, which is up in Swing Create, Polygon Primitive and Helix. And if anyone doesn't know what a helix is, it's a coil, essentially. So there you go. So that's what a helix is. It's a coil, and we can easily make one of these. And these are really useful for stuff. But because I know I want to come from the middle, curl it around, and then go in back into the middle and curl it back up, it'll be a bit of a pain to use a helix. So what I'm going to do, just like I showed you in class, I'm going to make it with an EP curve. Okay, we're coming up to an hour. This is probably going to be 2 videos, or maybe even 4 videos. I'm going to split them up and maybe into chunks, just to give you an outline. Okay, yeah, it's coming up to an hour now. So yeah, I'm going to make this antenna using an EP curve, and then I'm going to extrude along that curve. So if I go down to Create, Curve Tools, EP Curve, I'm going to want to, so I've seen a lot of people use this curve and they start from the bottom and they go to the top. Now when we do to our extrusion, we need to put our geometry we're going to extrude at the beginning of our curve. And when we create a curve, you can see that these two, like a square and a U shape, will be the first two little symbols in our chain, and then it'll end on a dot. So what our tool does, what our extrude does, it looks for a square and a U, and then it takes that as the beginning, and then it goes through the chain until it finds the very last point, and then that's where it'll extrude to. So we want to, you can either make it from the top or from the bottom. It doesn't really matter. It only matters when it comes to actually extruding it, extruding the object, extruding the geometry along that curve. So I'm going to go back to EP, and I'm going to make it downwards. So I'm going to make it from the ball. I'm going to make it down. So I'm going to click and click and click. And what an EP curve does is, so I'll explain the 2 curves just quickly. So an EP curve, when you click 3 times, it then starts to create the curve. And if you notice, if you just look at these actual intersections where you get these little X's, every time I make a new point, it changes. So it kind of like compensates for the curve to try and make it as smooth as possible. So when I make a really, so here, if I just click here to make a really crazy angle, you can see that this curve is now compensating. And that's what an EP curve does. I'll bring it back just an example. What a CV curve, if you look inside, you can see a CV curve as well. So what CV curve does is it only works after 4 clicks. So if I make 4 clicks, you can see that now it makes a curve. And what CV curve does is it makes a curve inside these angles. So you make a corner, it will make a curve inside that corner. So even if I make a crazy corner, it compensates to stay inside. So it will never bridge, it will never go over these lines. So if you were making pipes for a room, or if you were making a pathway that needed to stick inside a certain area and it couldn't go outside of it, you'd probably need to use a CV curve. But for this, we could probably just use an EP curve. So let's go to use EP curve. And like I said, I'll go from the top, I'll go from the little antenna ball, go down, and I'm going to click. I'm just going to follow the general sort of shape and down. Cool. So now we've got that. And from the front we can start to, if you hold right click over your curve and go to control curve, you can see that it might be a little bit hard to see here because it's purple and white on top of white. But we've now got our curve in place. And you can see all these control curves are also here. So what we can do is we can start moving these around to fit our, oh, that's where you are, okay. We can start moving these around to fit our antenna curve. And what you'll notice as you go through, you'll see that the line turns from blue to white. The white means that that control point is controlling that section of curve. So anything I grab is going to be selected inside this curve area here. Obviously, the closer to the point it is, the more it'll be influenced. The further to the edges it is, the less it's influenced. But the influence will be inside those areas. So I'm just going to go through and I'm just going to... You might click off it for every now and then. Just go over, hang over, hold right click, go to control vertex. And we're just going to just follow around the curve. Again, with this character, I didn't want it to be strictly realistic, so don't worry if the curve's a little bit janky, a little bit wobbly. You know, it might give a really nice character to the actual thing. So from the front, it looks okay. But if I go to perspective, you can see that it's very flat. From the side, it's still a very straight line. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go into the side view, or even we can even do it in perspective view, side view or perspective view. But all I need to worry about is just being aware of how this moves. So as we come to the top here, we can either think that the coil is coming towards us or it's bending away from us. So if it's bending away from us, if we go into control vertex, we need to know that we need to just start going through and just start grabbing each one of these control verts, and then see when geometry is in the scene, it will want to it'll want to keep grabbing the geometry over the curve, which is rather annoying. So I'm just going to go through now, and I'm just going to start just massaging these control points into place, so that it creates much more of a coil shape. You can see that I'm going to try and keep these two sticks, top and bottom, I'm going to try and keep them in the middle of the coil, just to give it like a really nice shape. If anyone's seen communication coils that are on top of all-terrain vehicles, you'll notice that there is kind of like a stick and then a coil. The pole will go through the middle of the stick and the coil will be in between. So I'm just going to go through and just adjust these. You will, because there are so many dots, you will have more points of, like, you will kind of have to be a bit more careful of how you click. Each one of these points is every one of my clicks. So the more you click, the more points you have. The less clicks, the less points you have. So where are we up to? Up to that one. Up to that one. Just going to go through and there we go. You can see that it's not a perfect coil, but it's, you know, it's a nice little thing. So I'll bring back my geometry. Boom. So now I've got that in place, all I want to do now is create a cylinder that's going to kind of extrude down there. What I'm going to do is going to go click on cylinder, and I'm going to click drag it out. Now naturally, when you make a cylinder, it's going to be a 20 division cylinder. I think that's a little bit too big, especially for the kind of like character we're making. So I'm going to click on this sub-axis here, and just in the scene, I'm just going to middle mouse drag. You can see those numbers changing now. Excuse me. I'm going to change it down to 8. And what 8 gives us is a really nice, we've still got a cylinder, still very recognisable as a cylinder, but it's a lot low poly. And what we've got is we've got a right angle. And when I work with cylinders, I always want that clear division. There's a division going down the middle, and there's a division going around the side. It's like that. I always try and work with them sort of shapes. So with that created, I'm going to go and go into face mode, and I'm just going to get rid of these faces. Yeah, I'm going to get rid of these faces. So I've only got the cap now. And what I'm going to do is just scale it down. So I want to scale this to the width of what the antenna is. So it's going to be a bit thin, but that's what we want. So I'm going to say a bit thinner. There you go. So just looking at my curve, I know that I started at the top, so I want to move this geometry to the top. Now you can snap stuff to the curve, but it's really finicky. So what I tend to do is just move it into place, just move it as close into place as possible. Sometimes if you hold C, sometimes it will snap, like see there. I was holding C and I just grabbed the center and just moved it, and it's actually snapped to the curve now. If it doesn't snap to the curve, don't worry about it. Just try and get the middle here. Just try and get that as close to the pivot as possible. Okay, so what I'm also going to do is I'm going to flip it 180 degrees so that our polygons are facing down. Because if we were to do the next process with the polygons facing up, the entire tube's normals will be facing inward, so it will turn black. So then we've got an extra process of reversing the normals and stuff. So just to save our our stress, I'm going to reverse them. So we have to face the direction we want to extrude. I'm going to move that back down a little bit. I'm just going to freeze transformation just to be clean. So I'm going to go select all these faces. If you double click an object by face, it will select the entire thing. But obviously this is just a disk, so we don't have to worry about too much. And I'm going to shift and just drag a selection box over the curve like that. You can see that we've got now the disk selected and the curve selected, and I'm just going to go click extrude, and then that should happen. And what that's done is we've basically told our geometry to extrude along a curve, so it looks for the square and it looks for the U shape at the very top, and then it goes down the chain until the very last point arrives, and then it'll snap the extrude to that. But obviously now it's not looking so amazing because it's just a straight tube. But if we go over here to divisions, we click on that and we just drag, you can see now that it's starting to snap and actually put our geometry around that curve. And it will end at 25, but you can actually go in there and add like 50. Oh, no, not 500. You know, we can add 50, and it'll just make 50 divisions going down. And how it kind of lays out this geometry is it lays out more geometry clustered around where there's more clicks. So I only clicked from here to here, so it'll lay in a few pieces of geometry here, and then around the main coils where I've clicked a lot, so there's going to be a lot more geometry there. I'm just going to move that number down to about 40. 403. So we have got this little bit of a thing going on here. I wouldn't worry about that too much because it is such a small element. One thing you could do is, and I will actually do this actually, so I'm going to make that the point. The only reason it's doing that is because the geometry is very wide. So as it comes down here and curves, it kind of has to fold in on itself to make that curve. So I'm just going to Z back to before we did the extrusion, and I'm going to make this geometry smaller. I'm actually going to try and fit it too. Yeah. So now I'll do the exact same thing again. I'll up the divisions. There you go. So I'm going to change that to about 35. Much better. So now we've got our nice little antenna made. One good thing about doing this process is we've still got a connection from our curve to our geometry. So if we went to move it, we would actually still be moving it. We would still be able to affect it. So I might be able to fix this actually here. By I'll do something a little bit like that. Now just move it around, massage the control points a little bit more. There you go. Yeah, that's better. There you go. So I can move that back into place now. Like I said, it doesn't matter if it totally doesn't follow this. As long as you've got the general shape in there, that's fine. So what I'm going to do now is, because we've still got connection, we can't directly delete that edge straight away. Because if we try and delete that curve, sorry. If we try to delete that curve, so I've got the curve that's selected there. If I delete that curve, it's going to delete the geometry as well. So what I want to do is I want to do two things. I want to go to modify, and while I've got my geometry selected, modify freeze transformation, and then edit delete by not delete all by type, just delete by type history, and then hopefully, yeah. So then when I so what we've just done there is we've broken the connection between the curve and the actual geometry. So when we delete the curve, our geometry is left over on its own. And then I'm just going to go through and grab the top group of faces by just dragging a selection box over that top section, which selects the top faces on the side. And if I hold shift and then drag a selection box over just the side, it'll delete those, but it'll keep those. Okay, I will delete them, and I'll do the exact same thing down here. So I'll drag a selection box over this. So I've got the top and the bottom selected. Well, I've got the bottom and the side selected, and I'll just drag a selection box over the middle, hit delete, and then I've got rid of those. So we've got a hole at the top and a hole at the bottom, because here is where we're going to start making the base, like the little rubbery pseudo little support there, and at the very top is where we can connect a low poly sphere. And I'm actually going to do that now very quickly. So I'm going to make a sphere, boom, but again, default shapes are very big. So I'm going to go in sub, I'm just going to drag a selection box over, like just click and hold on subdivision, drag down, and you get subdivision axis, subdivision height selected. And in this scene I'm going to hold down the middle mouse button, and I'm going to drag to the left, and that will turn down your subdivisions. And I'm going to break that down to 8. So it's a very low poly sphere, but that's all we need. So we've got 8 divisions going around the edges now, and we've got 8 divisions going around the top of this antenna. So we can go and delete a run of faces like that. We can rotate it around 90 degrees, and I'm going to go move that into position. I'm going to select both of these and perspective, and then I'm going to move that back. So at this point all I'm trying to do is just line it up as best I can with each other. Like that. Don't have to be pinpoint perfect, but as close as you can. So I'm going to select both of the objects now, and I'm going to hit our combine button. So they're now one group of objects, and I'm going to do the exact same thing we did with the screen and with the back of the radiator. I'm going to use a bridge tool to bridge between 2 points. So this is our bridge tool, remember? Turn down divisions. Now one thing I can do now, so let's see if it works. Let's see if it doesn't work, in fact. So what you hypothetically can do is double click both these ring of edges, and then you should be able to subdivide them. Okay, so it's done. Sometimes what will happen is you'll get twist, so this face will go connect with this face, and then it'll kind of twist itself around the object, and it won't look nice, and obviously it's not usable. This time it's not done that, it's just giving us our proper connection, because that's what we want, just that really nice straight connection. But if you do get this sort of like weird twisting thing happening, what I do is I just, if I make one bridge like that, I make one bridge, and if I just double click the edges, it'll select all the edges, and it'll also select these two edges here, like the edges of this new bridge we've made. So I'm just going to deselect those, and I'm going to click bridge again, and then it will completely, it'll have an anchor in which to build the rest of the bridges off, and that allows us to make our bridge proper. So there we go, that's our little antenna done. Now the ways we can make our little base is by double clicking the bottom ring, so we got that selected, and literally just extruding, like extrude, then I've just scaled it out there, as you can see, and then I'm going to extrude again, move it down, extrude again, move it out, extrude again, move it down, extrude again, move it out, extrude again, move it down. So we've now got our basic shape of this little thing. So what I could do, I could go around and bevel each one of these edges just to make it a little bit rounder, like that. Just adds a little bit more visual complexity, a little bit more visual appeal, instead of just really harsh edges. So now that's our antenna done. That's our really simple antenna done. It's an 8-sided shape. It's a really simple, but if we soften that, it looks higher poly than it really is. It's only 416 faces, and that's not a whole lot in the grand scheme of things. Okay.